In 2005, the PSP was released. Rockstar wanted to compete in the portable games market, so they released Liberty City Stories for the PSP. Despite being well received, the game would end up being kinda buggy and it struggled to maintain a good frame rate. But after 1 year, Rockstar would better understand the PSP and the game engine, which would result in the creation of the forgotten GTA. Set in Miami, Vice City Stories is the prequel to Vice City. The game follows Vic Vance, Lance Vance's brother from Grand Theft Auto Vice City, released 4 years prior. In GTA Vice City, we actually see Vic get gunned down at the beginning of the game. The PSP game was released to a positive reception and has a score of 86 on Metacritic. Rockstar would then port the PSP version to the PlayStation 2, but it was criticised because it used a lot of the original code from the PSP and they didn't really fix any of the known bugs. But Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories will forever be one of my favourite Grand Theft Autos. I had it on the PSP, which meant I could play it on long drives, easily take it between my parents' house, and hide it under my pillow so I could play until 2 in the morning. While it being portable was a huge reason I loved it, another thing I loved about the game was the story. The story begins when Vic lands in Vice City and enrolls in the military. He does this to raise money for his sick brother Pete. However, as soon as Vic enters the base, he meets his supervisor, Sergeant Jerry Martinez. Martinez ends up being incredibly corrupt and asks Vic to help him on a drug deal. After a lot of convincing, Vic finally agrees to help him. However, after the deal goes wrong, Martinez frames Vic for hiding drugs under his bed and bringing a prostitute into the base, resulting in Vic being discharged from the military. After having his entire career ruined, Vic ends up working for Phil Cassidy, who he met during his work for Martinez. And actually, Martinez then hires Phil and Vic later on to do more work for him, only for him to betray them again. Vic also finds work from Phil's brother-in-law, Marty J. Williams, who is the leader of a street gang called the Trailer Park Mafia. Marty also abuses his wife Louise, who actually ends up becoming a love interest for Vic. This pisses Marty off, so he attempts to kidnap her, which forces Vic to kill him and save Louise. With Marty dead, Vic takes over his gang. He renames it to the Vance crime family. Shortly after, his brother Lance Vance then arrives in Vice City and eventually helps Vic with the Vance crime family takeover. The pair end up stealing a huge drug shipment from Martinez, which results in Vic and Lance being kidnapped by Armando and Diego, aka the Mendez brothers. It turns out the drugs that they stole actually belong to the Mendez brothers, who are the drug kingpins of Vice City. So Vic and Lance end up being forced to work for them to make up for their mistake. They begin working with the Mendez brothers, who introduce them to Rennie. Rennie then introduces Vic to Barry, the talent manager for Phil Collins. Vic is then tasked with protecting Phil from the mafia hitmen, all because Barry owes them money. Later on, Rennie introduces Vic to Ricardo Diaz, who wants to take over the Mendez brothers' operations. However, this causes the Mendez brothers to grow distrustful of Vic and Lance and eventually make an attempt on their lives. Eventually, the Mendez brothers kidnap Louise and Lance, leading to Vic storming their mansion and killing Armando. But he fails to rescue Louise, who then dies in his arms. Desperate for revenge, with the help from Phil Cassidy and Ricardo Diaz, Vic manages to steal the army chopper from Fort Baxter. Using this chopper, Vic goes to Martinez and Diego's hideout and then kills the both of them. Lance then shows up to help after everyone is dead. Good to see he's still useless in this game as well.
This is the Lance Vance Day.
Lance tries to convince Vic to help with a drug deal coming up, but Vic is no longer interested, and instead he just wants to send Pete money for his medication. But eventually, Vic returns to Vice City and is killed in a drug deal gone wrong, starting the events of Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I always loved Victor Vance as a protagonist. From the beginning, Vic only really wanted to help his brother. He wasn't a mercenary, a gangster, a criminal mastermind, or a psycho. In the beginning, he was just a regular guy who got caught up in some bad shit and couldn't see a way out. Throughout the story, I always felt like I was rooting for him, whether it was his relationship with Louise, him struggling to meet ends meet, or getting revenge on the people who wronged him. I felt the story was really well crafted, excluding some of the corny lines and rushed plot points. But with all the waggy characters paired with the over-the-top rags to riches story makes it incredibly entertaining to this day. And what better place for this criminal empire story to take place other than the fictional version of Miami? The violence, women, sports car, vibrant colours and the 80s theme really give this story a dopamine-fueled setting. Every outfit, car, radio station made this game so memorable to this day. Overall, the gameplay is not terrible, even with today's standards. Yes, it is flawed, but it's still completely playable in 2022. And what makes Vice City Stories more impressive is that it was a PSP game made in 2006. That's insane. Not only do you have a fully fleshed out sandbox capable of walking, driving, and combat, you had a 15-hour long story with celebrity casting, all in a fucking PSP game. So my question is, why isn't this game talked about more? Why was it forgotten? I think it's because of two main reasons. It was overshadowed by Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. San Andreas was released 2 years prior, but it was ahead of its time. It has better graphics, smoother gameplay, better side missions, and much more. Playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories after playing San Andreas feels like a step back in time, which is understandable because Vice City Stories was built on a much weaker console, and you can't really expect it to compete with the technology pushing Goliath that was San Andreas. The other reason it was forgotten was that the game was a PlayStation exclusive, and it was originally a PSP exclusive, and it only became available on the PlayStation 2 a year later in 2007, meaning if you wanted to play this game, you either had to own a PlayStation 2 or a PSP. And don't forget, the PlayStation 3 had already released in 2006, and it wasn't ported to the PS2 until 2007, further shrinking the amount of people who probably played it. But despite Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories being the forgotten GTA, it is still a fun game full of personality and lore. Now, it may not have had Bigfoot roaming around it like San Andreas did, but there were a lot of cool Easter eggs. Thanks for watching.